Hey everybody, week 7 of the NFL season upon us. We're going to be breaking down the entire Sunday slate, all from a DFS angle. Coming up next in the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Oh, and we may have a football trade to talk about at the top. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version, sponsored by No House Advantage. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Fridays mornings by Ryan Belongia. Ryan, how are you this morning? Apparently there's some football news we probably need to hit before we talk about DFS.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, I'm doing good, but probably not as good as you. You were the first person I thought of when I saw that McCaffrey trade.
I appreciate that. Yeah, wild trade last night. There've been a lot of rumors about Christian McCaffrey get traded, but NFL midseason trades, always some rumors, but usually a ton doesn't happen. It's changed a little bit lately. I think the Rams with Von Miller last year was a big deal, but huge trade. I think they get second, third, fourth, and fifth. I think that's obviously a lot of picks. It's a running back. It's a 26-year-old running back who's been injured a bunch, but as just stepping back, not looking at it from a sensical angle like that, as a fan, this is really fun. Christian McCaffrey always went to Stanford. I'm a big Stanford football fan too. One of my favorite players ever. Coming to San Francisco is pretty wild. He's been healthy so far this year. Obviously the health is the biggest thing, but when healthy, this offense sure has a lot of dynamic playmakers now all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get arguably the best running back in the league, I think you've got to go for it. And I know the Niners might have gave up a lot, but I don't know how you can pass that up. Now, look, they got McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, some great skill players, amazing skill players on defense. Definitely got a chance to win now with some competent quarterback play. Yeah,
I mean, competent quarterback play is obviously the key here. I think health is the key here. I think they were missing 12 starters or something last week. You only get 22. It's just wild. But it seems like they should have a lot of guys back this week. I don't think that Charvarius Ward and Eric Armstead will be back, but we're talking about Trent Williams might be back, Nick Bosa might be back, Jimmy Ward might be back. So, obviously the Niners get the Chiefs this week. We'll talk a lot about that game. It's going to be a very, very tough matchup there. Sounds like McCaffrey's going to suit up, but maybe just kind of have some special packages in play. I won't pretend to know enough about X's and O's and inside football to know how it seems like a running back would be the easiest spot to at least jump in and kind of say, hey, this play goes here, hit the hole and go. I understand that there's a lot of blitz protections and calls and stuff that need to be picked up. But football is very complicated on the kind of that granular level. But in terms of getting him set for maybe, 10, 12 touches, that sort of thing, I think that they could probably figure out something to at least get him set up and ready to go a little bit. Wouldn't you think?
I would think so, yeah. A player like McCaffrey, I think they can put a few packages in for him. Yeah. And it's an exciting game for his debut, against the Chiefs. We're going to talk about this game for DFS too, so.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, when you got Trent Williams, he plays, and George Kittle, I think that it's not as simple as run behind 71-85, but I don't think it's that complicated. You can't tell him to do that too. So it should be very interesting. For a fan, I think the key with the picks is we mentioned this off air, but D'Amico Ryan's going to get hired somewhere in the offseason. That gives the Niners 2 more third-round compensatory picks. So I think they're counting on that a little bit too. So maybe that softens the blow a little bit. They still have a lot of picks. They don't have a first rounder this year, obviously, from the Trey Lance deal, but they do have a lot of picks, kind of in the middle of the round, so they could afford it. It's a big swing. I think a lot of it was. I don't think Kyle wanted the Rams to get McCaffrey, and they were probably the next up here. So I think there might have been a little bit of a, maybe I'll overpay a little bit so you don't get them, because I think the Rams, obviously have a huge hole at running back. The Niners really didn't, but they weren't dynamic there with Mitchell hurt, and Jeff Wilson's good, he's fast, but I don't think he's anywhere near C-Max. So it should be fun. But yeah, you're right. Let's we got to talk about the DFS slate. I could probably talk McCaffrey with you for an hour, and everybody would be really bored by the time we were done. So let's jump off. That's not what people are here for. 11 games on the slate this week. We have 4 teams on bye, and why do we have 4 teams on bye, Ryan? The Bills, the Rams, the Vikings, and the Eagles. Talk about 4 teams that are loaded with a lot of players that we normally talk about. Maybe the Rams less than the other ones, but obviously Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs. I just named 4 of the top 8 receivers every week in DFS. Normally, you got some running backs there with Dalvin Cook. You got a lot of quarterbacks, obviously, with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. So a lot of guys off the slate this week. We didn't miss a lot last night with the Saints and the Cardinals. High scoring game, and kind of a weird game. But it should be a fun slate. We got 11 games. There's 7 early and 4 late, including that Niners Chiefs game. Looking at totals, I kind of lowered our, what the total needs to be for us to talk about it. There's 4 games that are over 47. There's 5 that are under 44 this week. But let's talk about the high total game. I'm curious where you're going this week. There's no stick out game kind of like there was last week. And Bills Chiefs only had 44 points, so it didn't quite shoot out. And then the crazy thing with last week, just real quick, is that Arizona Seattle game. We're like, oh, there's gonna be a lot of points. They finished 19-9 or something like that. I forget what the 19-12, whatever the final score was. That was a big stinker of a game.
Yeah, that was a big stinker of a game. And the Seahawks are going to be in a popular spot again in the highest total game against the Chargers. That was a weird game, too, that Seahawks game. The Seahawks actually played at their fastest pace of the season. And the teams were moving the ball and stalled inside the 20 a bunch of times, turnovers in the red zone. It could have went differently. But, yeah, it went pretty badly for – No, yeah, that's okay. As far as these games, the 4 you mentioned – the 4 with totals above 47 are the ones that stick out. That Seattle Chargers game, I think, will probably be the most popular, just with the 51 total. Seahawks are cheap. But, after that, so I have some interest in the Bengals Falcons game.
I like it.
That game, I think, has a very wide range of outcomes, definitely boom-bust potential. The Falcons have been playing really slow lately. I mean, that their objective is to slow the game down and run the ball and not pass much. It's pretty much the only way they can win or stay in games. Their defense is so bad. Their offense really isn't good. But the Bengals, since week 2, have been passing at the highest rate in the league, 71%. Burrow started to look good. We've seen the Falcons give up some huge games. And, if the Bengals can get out to an early lead, the Falcons won't really have much of a choice whether to play a little bit faster or start throwing the ball. So I do like the Bengals stack. And then Cowboys-Lions is interesting. I'm sort of torn on that one. Interested to hear your thoughts. And I was also interested to hear your thoughts on KC and San Fran, which I don't know what the McCaffrey trade does to that matchup. It might make it a little more difficult to roster some of the 49ers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he'll play and be in there. I just don't think he'll play enough to really alter that game that much. I mean, I think that you don't play Jeff Wilson as a result, but I think maybe beyond that it doesn't change too much. Lions Cowboys is really interesting because it's a matter of whether the Lions can do enough against the Dallas defense to really make this shootout. We've seen the Lions, in some shootout games. We've seen the Lions some games where they don't really score very well. So I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago against New England. They're off the bye. But they're coming back healthy, which I think was huge. DeAndre Swift's going to play. Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to play. He played last game, but didn't look like himself. So that's a really interesting game because I think that the fascinating fact there too is you've got a team with a big implied total in Dallas, but the quarterback's coming off injury too. There's a lot of what ifs in that game, but you could see there's a lot of ways where it could shoot out. I think that's the toughest game to handicap in terms of what's going to happen in terms of a total, just because with Dak coming back off not playing for 5 weeks, it's hard to play him, but it's also hard to ignore him too against this awful Detroit defense.
Right. And, a lot of times I look at the Lions to try to target running backs against them. And we almost never want to roster Zeke, but if there's a time, it might be this week. I mean, you can see them having some success on the ground too. So I don't know. I've been considering the running game.
Yeah, interesting. Ward Willis in the chat mentioned that Shanahan's doing a press conference right now. He said he's not sure if Christian McCaffrey will play. So obviously that's a big question mark. I tend to think they'll build something for him and he'll get out there a little bit, especially because they're playing the Chiefs. They're going to want to let him to have a little bit of action out there. But of course, I think he's flying in this morning. It's a matter of getting up to speed and all that and doing his physical and all that. So I think that it's something to monitor. We'll know by Sunday whether he's going to play or not. So I think that's just something to kind of monitor as we get closer to Sunday. We do have some low total games this week. We got some rough games out there. Indy and Tennessee is 42. Green Bay, Washington is 41. Tampa Bay, Carolina is 40. Giants, Jacksonville is 43, but it's kind of an interesting game. And then Jets Broncos is 38. I think we've finally seen that the books are adjusting to how poor this Russell Wilson offense has been.
Yeah, tough to have interest in those games outside of maybe a piece here and there. Yeah. The other one I don't know if you mentioned it. I think the total's right in the middle. This Las Vegas-Houston game could be interesting.
I think we're gonna have one of the bigger chalk plays of the week in that game too.
Yep, I think so. And we might have Darren Waller out, which would make passing stacks easier if you want to go that route. So yeah, I think that game's interesting as well.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about. It should be even with those 4 teams off the slate, it's still a pretty fun group of games, especially with 4 games that are over a 47 total. So I think it should be, especially the afternoon, should be a lot of fun. Although we thought that last week, but I think maybe we have a fun afternoon this week. But let's jump into it. But first, a note from our sponsors at Play with Swagger. There are 50 million fantasy sports players and sports bettors in the U.S., but 90% of them of all cash prizes are won by 2% of the players. That's because most sports gaming options were created for pros. You know, the dudes dropping loads of cash on data to find an edge over the rest of us, not Swagger. Swagger is a daily fantasy sports site created for sports fans who simply want some skin in the game and a real shot at winning. Tired of losing because of one bad pick? With Swagger, you don't need to be perfect to win. You simply create a ticket of 4 to 10 simple player props and score points to the ones you get right. Your score determines your win, not the perfect ticket. You can be half right and all right with Swagger. Swagger offers the most player props and biggest payouts of any DFS site, as much as 50 times your money. Plus, you can play fantasy football along with other major U.S. pro sports, as well as international soccer, Formula One, NASCAR, fight sports, rugby, cricket, and even esports. Ready to play? Visit playwithswagger.com/RotoWire to sign up, and Swagger will give you $10 free to try them out, plus match your first deposit 100% up to $100. Swagger, daily fantasy for all fankind. So, Ryan, let's talk real quick about who we think will be popular this week. I don't think it's like last week we had a week where there were 3 or 4 running backs. Like everybody's gonna kind of cycle between these 3 guys. I think it's a little bit different this week. But let's start at quarterback. Do you think there's any quarterback that's going to be really chalky? I don't. I think that Lamar Jackson at 8,000 against the Browns in this matchup is probably the most popular. There are some cheaper ones. I think we'll get some interest too. But there's no quarterback that stuck out to me as like, oh, everybody's going to play that guy.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned at the start that we have no Josh Allen and no Jalen Hurts, who are probably the 2 that people like to roster most. So, yeah, at the top, Lamar will be more popular than Mahomes. And if you go all the way to the bottom, Geno Smith will be relatively popular at 5,600. In between, there's some other guys that are going to be right in that range, like Herbert and Burrow. Herbert 7,200, Burrow 6,900. People will look to in sort of that top mid-range. And then going a little lower, Derek Carr for 5,900 stands out. And even all the way at the bottom, you mentioned that Giants Jaguars game. Daniel Jones is 5,100. So those guys are projecting the best. But yeah, no one stands out as someone that's going to be overly popular.
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I think it'd be Lamar, but I don't think that anybody really jumps out very much. I think it's a little bit different at running back. I think that Josh Jacobs at 6,500 definitely does stick out. He looks really good before the bye. He was 21 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. He was on that primetime game where he's running people over. Looked really good. Hit 83% of the backfield touches in that last game. Great matchup against Houston. Good game script. They are favorites. He's pretty cheap at 6,500. Houston's allowing 5 yards per carry. Like, it just kind of all lines up. Game script, matchup, player, coming off a primetime game where he looked great. I think that Jacobs 6,500 has to be the most popular running back.
Has to be. Yep. Yeah. Those recent numbers are just incredible. 5 catches in 3 straight, and then 33 fantasy points, 37 fantasy points, just so many touches and such a good matchup. So yeah, Jacobs will be the most popular. For cash games, it's one of those where you don't even think about it. You just got to roster him.
Yeah.
But yeah,
are there any other running backs you think are like, oh, this guy's going to be really popular this week? This is kind of a chalky cash game play that I'm all over. It felt like it's spread out a little bit. Maybe Leonard Fournette at 7,700, but he's pretty fairly priced. So it's like that game works out well. They're 10, 11 point favorites against Carolina, maybe a little higher now that McCaffrey's not there. I haven't looked at the odds this morning since that adjusted. Usually a running back doesn't adjust it that much, but I think that he's fairly priced at 7,700. So I don't know if he'll really stick out. Is there anybody else you thought was like, oh, everybody's going to have him this week? Kind of like we had last week.
Yeah, you hit it with Fournette. He's priced up there now, but he would be the one that people go to. He still projects well in that range. Other than that, I think Kenneth Walker is still okay at 5,800. He's probably the cheapest you could go in cash games, at least as news stands for now. Another guy I kind of like, and he's going to be relatively popular that you could consider is is Damien Pierce for 6,400. He had 29 touches last week. He's been catching passes. So yeah, I think Pierce would be okay. But yeah, nothing really stands out too much. I mean, Mixon projects pretty well, but he kind of always does, and he never really does much.
It's been kind of a weird year. He caught a TD last week. I think the only other guy who might come into play here is Kenyan Drake at 5,100. If J.K. Dobbins sits out, if Justice Hill sits out, Gus Edwards I don't think is going to be back yet. So he's got like a path where maybe it's this 1 week where not everybody's ready, or J.K. Dobbins like kind of been lower. His usage has been going down, and he missed practice yesterday. So Drake looked really good last week. He's a guy that could kind of sneak up in that percentage game if everybody kind of it works out injury wise. Any receivers that stick out to you as like everybody's going to have him this week? Last week we had a couple of them, but nobody really that high percentage. Is there any receivers you're like, you looked at the price, you're like, yeah, this just makes sense?
Yeah, not so much in the cheap range or in the mid range as we've had in other weeks, but sort of in that 6K range. CeeDee Lamb and T. Higgins project really well for their price. CeeDee now with Dak back, he's been seeing a ton of targets, and it's a really good matchup against Detroit. And then Higgins fully healthy now, good matchup, seeing a ton of targets. So Lamb and Higgins look good for cash games. Below that, Tyler Lockett's going to project well again. His price only raised by 200, and he's.
I like how he has a terrible game. His price goes up.
Right, he's playing in the highest total game on the slate, so Lockett will be in consideration for cash games as well. What about you? Did anyone stand out at receiver?
Lamb was the one under 7,000 at 6,800 that in that game against the Lions, the matchup's so good. He's got a ton of targets. Dak is back. You mentioned T. Higgins. The other, I looked at that too. The other guy that jumped out to me a little bit was Chris Godwin at 6,300. I don't know how much Tampa's going to have to throw against Carolina, but 12 targets last week. Carolina's struggled a lot versus slot receivers. I think that Godwin kind of comes in a little underpriced also and probably popular. Any tight ends that jumped out to you like, oh, everybody's going to play this guy this week?
I think it's going to be a cheap tight end. I think it would have been Cade Otton, and it still will be to some extent if Cameron Brate is out. But you'll also have Foster Moreau for the same price if Waller is out. And at least for cash games, people like to play these min price tight ends if they can, and like those are two guys that you could play. I mean, you might even have people considering min price Greg Dulcich for the Broncos, but Otton and Moreau would project better. In the top range, Andrews, if you wanted to go all the way up, but it seems tough to get there in cash games. What do you think?
It's an interesting week because Kelsey and Andrews are so highly priced that it's always hard to get there with those guys. You're like, well, I'll just play a receiver or a running back instead. But those two guys earn those prices. Andrews has been really good the last couple weeks. Kelsey also had the 4 touchdown week a couple weeks ago, even though he had 25 yards. But you get those two guys and you drop way down. If Waller doesn't play, Kittle's the next highest at 5,300. There's no one under 5,000. I was hoping you didn't mention Dulcich because that was when I was going to mention. I was hoping I was going to be break some news there, but I think he'll be pretty popular this week. Coming off he had the touchdown in his first game for the Broncos. Only had 3 targets though, but he's 2,500 a lot. And then you look at I know season long doesn't really equate perfectly, but he was a popular pickup in season long. I just need to kind of freshen everybody's mind a little bit off the Monday night game with the touchdown. Off every picking him this week. I think people see 2,500. I think that'd be an easy click on a lot of lineups.
Yeah, I think so too. And you figure they'll be working him in more too. That was his first game. I mean, Alberto was a healthy scratch, so yeah, right. It should get better for him.
Someone in the chat mentioned if we'll do regular fantasy questions today. Sure, fire something off as we go through our DFS slate. If we have you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask it. DJ Duvernay. Hope he's related to Devin Duvernay because that'd be pretty nice, a nice listener to the podcast. But let's talk about game stacks. We're going to tournaments here. We're trying to hit it big. What are you doing in terms of what are your favorite quarterback receiver game stacks week? And obviously the run back on the other side, but where are you looking to go with your lineups this week?
Yeah, I'm sure you would mention this one too, but if Keenan Allen's out, I'm just gonna have to stack the Chargers. It just makes so much sense in this spot, and it's really easy. I see that Allen's questionable, but there's a report that he might just sit this one out because they have a bye next week. I mean, that would make a ton of sense. Josh Palmer
quite a hamstring tweak though. Jeez.
Right, since week 1, and he's sort of been like questionable every week, almost like a game time decision even sometimes. But then you got Palmer, who's in concussion protocol. We'll have to see if he practices today, but he hasn't practiced yet. So you might really get some stuff to open up on the Chargers side if these guys are out. So I'm going to be paying attention to that because I would love to play Herbert with Mike Williams. Mike Williams got shut down by Patrick Surtain in that primetime game. He only had 2 catches, and there's receivers in that range that are going to be more popular than Mike Williams, even if Allen's out. And he had, he was posting some huge target numbers before that. 13 targets, 11 targets, 10 targets. I mean, he can be the highest scoring receiver on the slate. So I'm definitely going to stack the Chargers, and I will run it back with Kenneth Walker for sure.
Yeah.
And then I'll have some other ones with DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. I'm not really sure who I prefer there. Either one seems fine.
Yeah, I think it works well too. The Chargers are weird right now. They're very, very up and down. I know they won on Monday night, but they looked like the offense looked horrible. Like I think Herbert threw for 4.2 yards per attempt. I mean, they had 57 passes for whatever it was, 240, whatever. It was weird. It was just a weird week. We talked about Keenan Allen might be back, but it sounds like you're probably right with the bye thing. It just makes sense to take the extra 2 weeks rather than kind of push it. But can this offense get rolling? It's certainly the matchup for it. Seattle defense is beginning up a lot. They played pretty well against Kyler last week, but I don't really take the Arizona offense, and it's just a weird offense too. So I think that if you're going to get it going, I think it's time for Herbert to have a big week. The other one I really like, you mentioned kind of in the same price range. I love how Cincy's running offense right now. They were out of the shotgun lot last week. They're really kind of playing to Burrow's strengths right now. Their offensive line, just is not good enough at the moment to have Burrow behind center and kind of run the normal offense. So you saw it in the first couple of weeks with how different it looked compared to last week. Burrow had 4 touchdowns last week, 3 passing, 1 running. Since he went more shotgun, Atlanta's allowing 69% completion rate, which is the 31st in the NFL, so second worst in the NFL. The Falcons are last in sack rate, which I think is the whole key to this whole thing. If you can't rush Cincy, look the heck out. The way to beat them is to expose their offensive line. But if you can't rush them, you can't get to the quarterback. You go Higgins and Chase out there. And I like how cheap Higgins is. You mentioned he's been a little bit quiet. He's coming off that injury. Chase, we talked about last week as a one-off play. It worked out really well. The 2 touchdowns, 130 yards. I think where I stack Burrow, I think I'm going to do it with Higgins this week. Kind of get the good week there, save 2,000 or so, 1,800 or whatever from Chase, and kind of go back. The run back with Atlanta is tough. Kyle Pitts scored last week. Drake London's been pretty quiet, but he talked a lot of smack last week, and it was weird. He didn't do much in the Niners game, but he was running his mouth the whole game. I happened to watch that because it was Niners a lot. I kind of liked it. I didn't like it against the Niners, but I like it in general. I like a little spiciness and diviness from my wide receivers. But I really like Burrow Higgins week, probably my favorite stack of the week.
Yeah, me too. I mentioned it at the start. I love the Bengals stack. I mean, I can see myself sort of just stacking the Bengals and stacking the Chargers and maybe being done with it. One thing to add about Pitts, I think I'm okay with Pitts this week. Cincinnati has been pretty bad against tight ends, and they are missing, is it Logan Wilson, I believe his name is? He's a 3-down linebacker for them. So they were already struggling against tight ends, and now maybe they struggle a little bit more. Pitts is cheap, so yeah, I'm on board with that.
Couple questions in the chat real quick. Someone mentioned they had Jeff Wilson starting with CMAC limit. They're playing Najee Harris for Jeff Wilson. I would definitely play Najee Harris as much as I'm not a fan. I would definitely play him for Jeff Wilson. Somebody asked, Ryan, do you prefer Evan Ingram or Hayden Hurst this week in a full PPR?
I think that's an interesting one. I think if Marvin Jones was out again, I wouldn't mind taking a chance on Ingram. He's been getting some more targets recently. I think Hurst has more touchdown upside. I don't know. That's a tough one. Do you have an opinion?
I think I like Ingram a little more. I think he had just a little more usage in that offense. He had 6 targets last week. I think I would go Ingram. Also, do you like? Would you grab Elijah Moore in the chance he's traded? Robert Saleh ruled Moore out this week. He had the demanding a trade, missing a day of practice, not playing this week. Obviously, a talented guy. I tend to think they won't trade Moore. I don't think they're gonna go in for that demand unless like someone like comes in with a really good offer. But I think they keep him. But I think he's worth a waiver spot. Obviously, I don't know how deep your league is. As long as you're a relatively deep league, there's enough talent with Moore that I think I take a shot on holding him to the second half.
Yeah, me too. It'd be weird to see a guy like that traded so early in his career. I agree.
I promise we'll get to the Carolina running back question when we do running backs, but we will get there on that. Any other passing stacks that you like? Any sneaky ones? We didn't really talk about Mahomes yet. He's 7,800. Obviously, the Niners defense is really, really good, although very, very banged up too. Like the Falcons pretty much kind of controlled the clock last week. They ran the ball a lot. They ran the ball really well. Not for a high yards per average, be able to like move the chains. Mariota had some big plays where he ran the ball. He had a 3rd and 13 where he ran the ball. Niners and mobile quarterbacks has always been an issue. But what do you do with Mahomes this week? Obviously, uber talented. He's 7,800. Hard to figure out his weapons. Last week it was Juju. The week before it wasn't. Always Kelsey though. Are you playing some Mahomes or not this week?
Probably not. Look, I totally get it. But like you said, it's hard to figure out his weapons. Kelsey's expensive. And, a matchup at San Francisco is usually one that I'm not targeting. Now, I get that game, of course, can put up more points than the rest. We got a bunch of low total games here. You wouldn't be surprised if both teams are in the high 20s or something like that. But I don't know. It's just hard. I would have to be guessing on who to pair Mahomes with, who to run it back with San Fran. I mean, it makes sense, but no, not for me. If I'm going to stack another one, I think it's probably going to be Derek Carr. Josh Jacobs is going to be mega chalk, so maybe on a couple lineups I won't play Jacobs. You can play Carr, obviously, with Devontae Adams. And then part of the reason I like it is if Waller's out, because one, that's just a few extra targets to the other guys, and maybe I would double stack Carr. Then I would add in either Renfro, whose price is way down there now, and I think Waller being out could be a nice little bump to him, or you could just forget about him and put in 2,800 Foster Moreau. And obviously you could run it back with Cooks, but I wouldn't mind running it back with a guy that's just not going to be owned at all. Nico Collins, 4,200. You could save yourself a lot of salary with Carr, cheap, Collins, cheap, maybe a cheap tight end. I'm looking at that stack. What about you? Anything else catch your eye?
Yeah, the interesting thing with the Carr stack is too, Hunter Renfrow missed practice yesterday. If he doesn't play, you could play Mac Hollins at 4,600 too.
Oh,
and
definitely.
That works also. I think he's one of my favorite cheap receivers. We'll talk about later if Renfrow does not play. And I think
definitely.
Renfrow hasn't done a ton, but still gets enough usage and stuff that like it's hard if Hollins is the third. But if Hollins is the second, you get a lot of coverage moving over to Devontae. I think that works really nicely. It's risky, but I do like the Dak Prescott stack. He's 6,700, Lamb 6,800. The Detroit defense is so bad. You have to think that, the Dallas has been winning them and rolling. They're only going to play him if they do think he's healthy. They probably could have played last week. They're like, yeah, let's go one more week with Cooper Rush. Obviously, they lost to Philly. Detroit's allowing 7 yards per attempt. They've allowed 4 top 10 quarterback games in the 5 weeks they played. They actually had a bye last week, so they won't play 5 games. But man, this matchup is just so good. I get it. They're probably going to try and run the ball, but I love Dak's chance of getting 3 touchdowns. If Goff and Amon-Ra can kind of get rolling a little bit, maybe we get a little bit of offense here. Although Micah Parsons rushing Jared Goff scares the crap out of me if you're a Detroit fan. But I do like that. Do you have any interest at all in number 10 in San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo, 5,500? A game you figure they have to throw. He's actually a top 10 QB the last 2 weeks, believe it or not. The Casey Pasty has been really bad though, which is why we kind of bring this up. They've allowed a lot of points, a lot of yards. The matchup's nice. I just find myself getting to other quarterbacks always before I get to Jimmy, but it lines up pretty well for if, say Kansas City scores early, they've got to throw more than they normally used to. If C-Mac plays, he's obviously a weapon out of the backfield. We got Debo, Ayuk with 2 touchdowns last week. Kittle had a nice game last week. They had 3 receivers over 75 yards last week. Like, that's pretty darn good. They obviously got behind Atlanta, had to throw a ball a bunch, and, kind of ran a weird 4-minute offense that took 10 minutes to run. You could talk at length about that, but I think Jimmy at 5,500, I rarely say it, but I think he's probably the most playable he's been is this week.
Yeah, I think he is too. I don't think I'll do it, but I would absolutely support it. I do like Kittle this week. So if I was to play Jimmy, I think it'd be with Kittle and maybe another guy too. You don't need it, but yeah, if there's ever a time to play Jimmy, it's here in a game that at least has the potential to shoot out.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the Niners are hard because they play a little bit slow. I mean, it's not last week they were trailing; they still didn't really get going. But I think 5,500 it works. Last guy I want to ask you about, someone I've ripped on a lot in this podcast, but he's 5,400. He threw 58 passes last week, 390 yards and 3 touchdowns. Is Matt Ryan? At Tennessee as an underdog. Tennessee is last in the NFL, allowing 8.5 yards per attempt. So another one that's a matchup play. They're throwing the ball a ton. Jonathan Taylor might play this week, which probably kind of kills it. If like he's playing, you probably don't want to. They probably won't throw the ball as much. But if they get down, they threw 58 passes last week, and this Tennessee pass defense is not good.
58 passes, yeah, unbelievable. Matt Ryan absolutely buried me last week. I was on Jaguars defense. I didn't have any Colts. All the Colts went off too. I mean, Deion, what the running back that filled in for Taylor.
Yeah,
I mean,
Deion Jackson. Yeah,
Deion Jackson. Yeah, Pittman. I mean, they all had
Pittman
huge games.
Pittman had 17 targets last week.
That's just
crazy.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think one thing that supports it is I kind of like Derrick Henry this week. So, that would sort of make sense. I wouldn't do it in sort of the small field or bigger buy-in stuff that I'm going to play, but in the larger field tourneys, I don't mind a play like that.
There's like an easy game script for that to work great. Like Henry scores twice in the first quarter and a half. It's 17-6 at halftime, and Ryan's like, all right, 30 passes in the second half. Henry closes out the game. Like it works really well. It's like who knows what happens in that game, but it works really well, and like you could see it kind of playing out that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since you mentioned Henry, let's jump into running backs. But first, a note from our sponsor, the Blue Wire Network. We thank them for that. And also a note from our sponsors at No House Advantage, who sponsor the podcast week. We appreciate that. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play in pick'em contests versus other people for a shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up now with the promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the App Store to get a first-time deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined. It's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on No House Advantage. Real quick, Ryan, I looked at No House Advantage props this week. It's a fun little game to play. I have it on my phone, kind of sitting there before I go to bed. I'm like, oh, this is fun. Let's get some props going. I shot you over some props. Give me a couple of these No House Advantage props that you like this week, and then I'll drop in a couple of mine.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is I haven't been doing so good with these No House Advantage props, so maybe people want to just go opposite of what I say. only
been a couple weeks. I have faith. In control. I don't remember. I know I was 2-0 the first week. I know I was 1. I know I had Kirk Cousins last week for a win. I forgot what my other one was. But what do you like this week with the lines I shot you?
I kind of like Zeke. I mentioned.
Yeah.
This is like one of the rare occasions where I might be on Zeke, and it's a matchup thing. It's against the Lions, who just get crushed on the ground so often. And I think Zeke's number was 66 or something. Yep. It only takes one like 20 or 30-yard run, and he's basically going to get there just on game script and the amount of carries he should get.
I'm glad you said 20 or 30. I think I said it takes one 50-yard run from Zeke, and I was like, I don't know if Zeke can run 50 yards anymore.
I don't know either. So I don't mind that Zeke number. And then we were just talking about Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's had some big games against the Colts, and this week sets up pretty good for him as well. He's been getting a ton of touches like usual. 102 yards last time, 114 yards last time. The week before that. Now off some extra rest. I think his number was 92 or something. Yeah, I could definitely see him going for over 100 here. So I'll take both the overs there. What about you?
So when we planned this out, I told you I was going to take some unders. I so lied to you about it. I'm not going to take any unders. That's no fun.
Good.
I like Michael Pittman this week. He's 71.5 receiving yards. I just like the way this game matches up. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. He had 17 last week. His over-under number is 71.5 receiving yards. I like him to go over that number. I think the volume will be there so much. I know he's not running deep routes. Interesting enough, he hasn't had a pass target over 20 yards yet this year. I think a lot of that is Matt Ryan, but we're going to get double-digit targets. Some of his talented Pittman can break 1-2. I think over 71.5 yards makes a lot of sense. I also do like Lamar Jackson over 1.5 passing touchdowns this week. He started out red hot in the past. I think he had 10 touchdowns passing the first 3 weeks, only 3 total last week. So I think it's the week he gets right. Maybe he gets Rashad Bateman back. We don't know about that yet, but I think against Cleveland, I like him to throw a couple of touchdown passes. One to Andrews, one to the relative of our chat friend here, DJ Duvernay, to Devin Duvernay. So we'll get 2 there. Interesting enough, I kind of like the under real quick. Kyle Pitts is 51.5. DJ Moore is 52.5. Those numbers feel pretty high to me for 2 guys who have done next to nothing this year. So I think I go an extra couple bonus picks if you do want some unders. I know I don't like to go unders, but I go Pitts and DJ Moore. Give me under 50 yards on those 2 guys.
Yeah, I saw that Pitts number too, and he's only had more than 25 receiving yards once.
Yeah.
So yeah, the unders on both those guys look good. DJ Moore with no quarterback. I mean, yeah.
52.5 yards. I don't know if PJ Walker threw 52.5 yards total last week. So
right. I mean, just trade DJ Moore to the Packers already.
Oh, there you go. That'd be a good one. Hopefully next week we'll talk about DJ Moore and Packers because you know how I feel about DJ Moore. It'd be a little heartbreaking to see him on your Packers, who are obviously a rival and someone that are really good for my Niners. But man, would that be a sweet pairing with A-Rod?
Yeah, and I don't think you have to worry too much. Like the Packers are only going to be a rival for probably just one more year until Rodgers retires.
No love for love there.
I don't know. Not really.
I want to say Julian Love. What's his first name? Jordan. That's it.
Jordan.
I was like, holy crap, what's his first name? Julian Love went to Notre Dame, plays DB, but it's crazy that they've drafted him so long ago. He hasn't really gotten.
I mean, just very questionable to use a first round draft pick on him. When you got Rodgers still pretty young at that time. Anyway.
So let's jump into expensive running backs. It's a week where there's a lot of them. You mentioned Derrick Henry. I mentioned Leonard Fournette. Those are just 2 of the names up here. We've got Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor coming back off the injury, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette. Those guys are all 7,700 on DraftKings up to 8,300. So this very tight, compact group of salaries where there's like, what is that? 6 guys within $700 of each other. What are you doing in this range? It sounds like you've answered it. It sounds like you're going Henry.
Well, yeah, I like Henry, but Austin Eckler's been absolutely smashing. 6 TDs in the last 3 weeks, and I mentioned it'd be important to monitor the news about Keenan Allen and Palmer in that matchup. I mean, that would also be another huge boost to Eckler. I mean, he had 16 targets last week, 10 catches. I mean, he has so much upside with the receiving, and now so much upside with the touchdowns that he's been scoring. So, yeah, Eckler and Henry just really stand out. You figure one of those guys is going to go for 30 fantasy points. So, yeah, I really like those 2. What about you?
I'm one who never usually goes with Henry in this group, but for this week, for me, it's Henry again. He's been a top 10 running backs 3 weeks in a row. Like you mentioned, has a good game against the Colts in the past. Had 147 total yards against them in week 4. So I do like that. I always love Nick Chubb. I don't like the spot this week for Nick Chubb as much. He's still 8,000. He only had 13 touches last week, and we saw that if they get behind, like he can be game scripted out of a game, which is always scary for a running back playing this much. So I tend to go with Nick Chubb when I like the matchup. I like the game script, and at Baltimore is not a spot I really want to play him. The Ravens do give up 4.5 yards per carry, so they're not great. But I think it's just too scary with all implied total 6.5 point dogs. I like Fournette a lot. 21 carries last week, only 60 yards, but he had 6 targets. He has 17 targets the last 2 weeks. Nice game script at Carolina. They're just going to, Tampa Bay obviously lost last week, killed a lot of people from survivor pools. Everybody lost in survivor pools last week, unless you had, I think it was the Rams and the Chargers, the only team that won. Maybe the Rams. The Rams did. The Rams won too, but it was a really rough survivor week. So I like Fournette at 7,700. I think I go Henry 1, Fournette 2 if I had to do it. Barkley and his at 7,900. Jacksonville plays the run really well. They're top 10 yards per carry. He does lead the NFL in touches, this is probably a week where I'm going Fournette and Henry instead.
Yeah, I'm with you. Fournette would be the other guy in that range. I'm really not going to play any of these other guys. After that, it'd probably just go down. I mean, we mentioned Josh Jacobs is such a good play.
Yeah.
And then you have other guys in this range. I mentioned I like Pierce. I like Kenneth Walker. Breece Hall is projecting well, although it's a tough matchup. And then might take a shot on Zeke Elliott, like I said. So I don't know, Scott. What about you in this 6K range, 5K range? I mean, anyone else standing out?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of names that I'm going to talk about too. I want to mention Joe Mixon kind of is in the middle of this range.
Yeah.
He's a little bit lower, but he's 7,000. He only had 12 touches last week, but did catch a touchdown. He was 845 rushing and 4 for 23 receiving. This is a nice game script though. They are favorites. So I think that Mixon is playable. But you mentioned earlier, it always kind of feels like we're kind of left a little bit uninspired by Mixon. But I think against the Falcons it works well. I think I'm going to play the Bengals passing game, so I probably won't play much Mixon. But I do get that one. You mentioned Zeke. You mentioned Kenneth Walker. Both really good plays. Obviously, Josh Jacobs. Walker looked good last week. He was 21 for 97 with a touchdown. He had 92% of the backfield touches. I think that led the NFL in percentage of backfield touches last week. The Chargers are allowing 5.8 yards per carry, if I had that stat right. They have a lot of big carries, too, a lot of explosive plays against them. So Walker works really well. A couple guys I wanted to ask you about down here. I think those are kind of the easier plays. We mentioned Zeke Jacobs. With Zeke, he was 13 for 81 last week. He's 6,000. Is there any part of you that wants to take this game but move to Tony Pollard at 5,700? More explosive. We'll have to hit the big play, though. He's only averaging, I think, 11 touches per game. So it's hard to get there 11 touches. But you mentioned a couple weeks ago, it was Ramondre Stevenson and Damien Harris. You're like, well, they great matchup. They split carries. If one of them tweaks something early, the other one is the biggest friggin' easy play ever. It will go off. It happened. Harris tweaked a hamstring. I think it was a hamstring. Stevenson went nuts. Tony Pollard would be the best play on the slate if something happened to Zeke. So I think it's a tournament play. 5,700 though, I think it's a big upside play. I kind of like playing Pollard at 5,700 if in a bigger field where you're really trying to spike something.
Yeah, I kind of do too. I mean, everything you said I agree with. It's unfortunate that he's just not getting as many touches with Zeke in there, but also that's going to keep him way, way down in terms of popularity. And like you mentioned, there's paths to him having a huge game, and there's more paths, even if Zeke is fine, of Pollard just outscoring Walker and the other guys in this range. I mean, he can still get to 20, with a few catches and a big play touchdown. So yeah, I think that's fine. And yeah, I'm glad you touched on Mixon. I wrote about the Bengals in my article, and it's such a good spot for the Bengals. I said if Burrow and the passing game fails, there's a very good chance that it's going to be Mixon who succeeds. So I'm going to look at Mixon on some teams where I don't stack the Bengals passing game.
So the other guy down here that I really, really like, and I feel like I'm always wary of getting a guy a week early because I think we feel like someone's going to blow up, and it's hard to time that. But you don't want to be a week late either. Travis Etienne in Jacksonville. He's 5,400 against the Giants. He has led the backfield in snaps last 3 weeks. So we saw a lot of James Robinson early. We've kind of seen it. Man, Etienne is freaking explosive. He was 10 for 86 last week, 10 for 71 before. That's 8 yards per carry. That's crazy right there. He's so dynamic. He has 5 catches the last 2 weeks. There's going to be a week here that Etienne goes nuts. He has the second most touches in the NFL without scoring a touchdown. Very famously, Alvin Kamara's first. He has not scored a touchdown. Over 100 touches. Etienne is actually second on the list. Hashtag to Scott Pianowski, who had that list earlier on Twitter today. I really like Etienne this week. Again, it's a tournament play. It can go bust. But I think we're going to have a game real quick where he scores twice, hits a 60-yard touchdown. It feels like every time he touches the ball, it's you hold your breath a little bit because he might bust the whole thing. Every time, every carry, it's so close. And I think it's coming. You might be a week early. You might be 2 weeks early. There's players we talk about like this that, maybe it's week 10 that he goes off. But I really like the price week, 5,400. I'm going to be playing some Travis Etienne in my lineups.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I can absolutely get behind that. And I agree 100% with what you said. You want to take some chances on being early on some of these guys. Yeah. Of course, you're not going to be always right, but they're not popular at these times when you try to get early on them. So yeah, it's a good risk to take. He's a guy with a huge ceiling. You mentioned he just needs to find the end zone, and it's only a matter of time.
And there's going to be a week where he goes off, and the next week he's going to be like 30% owned too. So I like to get ahead of that. We mentioned Kenyan Drake. He's 5,100. He becomes into play really quickly if Dobbins sits, and so he has 10 for 119 last week. Looked fast. He had that play, the long touchdown run where like you realize that playing running back with Lamar is such a gift because the holes are just gigantic. You just got to hit them, and I think Drake becomes a play really fast for a lot of people if Dobbins sits and if Justice Hill sits, and Gus Edwards I mentioned maybe not quite back yet. Before we jump out of running back real quick, with the McCaffrey trade, obviously we have a huge hole in the Carolina backfield. We have Dante Foreman is 4,000. Chuba Hubbard is 4,500, so actually more expensive. It's really hard to get to one of these plays in DFS. They're 11-point underdogs against Tampa, who has a really good defense. Like, if you want to like fully punt here, I get it. But like with guys in the 5,000s that I actually like, I don't think I'll get myself playing them in a season-long league. I'd add Dante Foreman before I add Chuba Hubbard. I think he'll be the lead guy. But this week against Tampa, I just don't see the path, even at 4,000 in a DFS setting. I'm just not going to do it. If Foreman falls in the end zone twice, they get some turnovers. Maybe you can see a path where it happens, but not something I want to risk with on my 2 running back spots.
No, me either. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you're just absolutely trying to force it, maybe if you're stacking the Bucks, Hubbard is going to be the pass catching back, I'd assume. Maybe he could catch. I don't know. Like you, I'm not trying to force it. I'm not trying to guess in this spot. It's a terrible matchup.
Their offense is
really bad.
Yeah, they're a mess. It's just I don't think I could do it. I'd play Foreman if I had to at 4,000 with the thought that maybe they just slide him into the McCaffrey role and he catches 4 or 5 passes and he gets there. But man, it's not a play I'm going to make. But I don't know.
Yeah, me too. I was just going to ask you: is it going to be? It's going to be Foreman. That's like
I don't know that
role.
I'm just guessing. I think Foreman's probably the lead guy, but I'm guessing. I don't think they've announced anything. I don't think they will announce anything. I'd pay Foreman if I had to. I'd save the $500, and I consider them so up in the air. I'd play it, save the money, but I don't really want to play either one. I'm not going to. We only have 2 running back spots. I would go up to. I'd go up to Drake and ATN and find the money so quickly from those guys.
Right. It's just this matchup for Carolina is so bad. I mean, there is no reason to force this.
Yeah. So let's jump into receivers now that we've hit quarterbacks and running backs. But first, to know from our sponsors at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, you got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. That's good for me. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL. That's RW, into RotoWire, NFL, to get your first deposit match instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So we talked about all the other positions. We talked about quarterbacks and running backs. We'll get to the pass catchers now. There's a bunch of expensive wide receivers too. I know we mentioned there's a lot of guys out, but Devontae Adams is 8,700. You mentioned him. We were talking about the Derek Carr stack. Jamar Chase, I was talking about the Joe Burrow stack, 8,200. Debo is 7,600. Michael Pittman, 7,400. Mike Williams, 7,200. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 7,100. We've hit a lot of those names already as we've kind of, weaved our way in and out of passing stacks. Is there anybody that any of these guys you like as a standalone? Like, say you're not stacking them. Is there anybody like, I really want to sneak? We talked about Jamar Chase last week. Like, a very low roster, going to sneak in there, have a big week. He did. It worked out really well. Is there anybody like that this week? Do you think that you kind of play naked this week in the expensive pass catchers?
Yeah, that's a good question because, a lot of these guys we've talked about and we're just going to have them because they're in our stack, like Chase or Adams or Williams that's pretty much all the top guys. I think as far as standalone guys with big upside, I mean, you mentioned one of them. I'll go all the way down to Chris Godwin, but him and Mike Evans, it's just such a good matchup and they have multiple touchdown upside. And I'm not, I don't really want to play Brady or I don't really want to stack that game. So I think as far as one-offs go, I think you could see Mike Evans or Godwin have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I don't know. I'll let you name somebody else.
Mine is back to old friend of the podcast, a guy who's treated us well over the last, probably 10 games, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't love the Detroit offense this week just because Dallas's defense is so good and they rush quarterback so well. But like, I just see so many balls going to Amon, quick passes out of the back or out of, Goff wanted the ball out of his hand. He doesn't want to get hit by Micah Parsons. He had 6 targets against New England, didn't do anything, but you could tell he wasn't fully back to speed. I think he is now. You look at those first 3 weeks, he had 12 targets and 9 targets. We're talking about like, this guy's a huge, he already broke out last year, but like continuing that breakout. 7,100. I don't think anybody's going to have him this week. We talked about how Mike Williams is right there. Pittman's right there. Nobody's going to stack Goff and with anybody. I just don't think you want to stack Goff against this Dallas team. I think that you break some rostership based on, people will play the Dak Lamb stack, but I think Amon-Ra is expensive enough where I think he's going to be overlooked pretty quickly this week. So I really like him as a one-off play or a run back if you want to play Dak and Lamb.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think not too excited about the Lions in this spot, but coming off a bye might give them a little hope.
Got a quick question in the chat. Someone that was getting negatively affected by Christian McCaffrey. Jason in the chat was going to start Jeff Wilson. Do you still start Jeff Wilson, or do you play Romeo Doubs, Alec Pierce, or Brian Robinson Jr. in a full PPR?
That's a tough question.
I like Alec Pierce a lot, but I'm probably still playing Jeff Wilson based on the fact that everything Kyle says at this press conference is like he might not play at all. If I hear differently by Sunday, maybe I switch to Alec Pierce, but I think I go Wilson right now still with the thought that Pierce will be a backup if McCaffrey looks to be more active than we think.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I would say full PPR. I do like the upside of those receivers. You never know when you can catch a ceiling game, and Dobbs and Pierce are both actually 2 of the better cheap plays this week, at least as far as DFS. I know this isn't DFS, but yeah, I don't mind receivers. I don't know. That's a tough question.
It is. It's a tough one. I think that Wilson just still will be like goal line. Like I just probably still involved, and it's potentially a high scoring game. But if they're like, oh, McCaffrey's going to play 20 snaps, then maybe I go to Pierce. I don't know. Okay. Tough call. Yesterday was not a good day for the Jeff Wilson fantasy stock for sure. There's no doubt about that. What about the mid-range receiver? There's a lot of names in here I want to talk about. Even it's quickly. We talked about T. Higgins, 6,400. I love that play this week. He looked fully healthy last week. I think the issue the week before was we saw him sitting on the sidelines. He ran routes on 90% of the dropbacks. Good matchup against the Falcons. I really like that. You mentioned Tyler Lockett at 5,800. Who else do you like in this range? I don't know, 5,500 to 7,000, somewhere in there. Who else do you find yourself playing? There's always a range where there are a lot of options.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm with you that T. Higgins is my number one. But after that, what do you think about Cortland Sutton? Is this a bounce back spot against the Jets? I mean, he had huge target numbers before this, or is it time to just forget about Russell Wilson in this passing game? I don't know. You could see an argument for Cortland Sutton. If you're playing Lamar, I think Amari Cooper is interesting. He's not going to get that much ownership, and 12 targets again, 12 targets, 11 targets, 10 targets. So I think Amari Cooper is interesting. Cooks is fine in stacks, in Raider stacks, but I don't know. I think I'm off Cooks. He's hurt me too much this season. Yeah.
Just not a lot of dynamic big plays from Cooks.
Right.
It's hard to get there when you're stacking those 5 or 6 yard catches. I don't know. It hasn't worked. But
do you have a favorite?
Cooper's my favorite in this range. I really like Cooper 6,100. Great game script. Cleveland should have to throw. He was only 4 for 44 last week, but scored a touchdown. He had, like you mentioned, the targets. He had 12 targets. He has double-digit targets in 4 of 5 weeks. The Baltimore pass D has improved recently, but still not one that I'm super scared of. I just think this is a game where they're going to get behind, and we talked about it with Nick Chubb. I don't like the game for Tim Chubb. I love the game script for Cooper. I think he's going to get 12 more targets, and you give me 12 targets for a talented guy at 6,100. I think I just take that every time and kind of roll with it. I think it's a really good floor play that has a chance to be an upside play too. And you get that kind of combo at 6,000. Give me that every day. I want to ask you about 6,100, same price in Green Bay. Allen Lazard, 9 targets last week, 4 for 76 and 1 touchdown. Hasn't had that huge dynamic games, but 8+ targets in the last 3 games. Good, a lot of targets coming from Rodgers is always a good thing.
Yeah, look, I get it, but I just can't with the Packers at this point.
You're just down in the Packers offense right now?
Man, yeah, I am. I like the last. He
scored 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Look, he's 4 TDs in 5 weeks. Yeah, look, I get it. I get it. I can't do it. I don't know. There's not much else I can say. I'm just not on the Packers anymore after I watched the last 2 games. It's probably just me being a fan. Like,
Right.
I'll be happy enough if they just do well and win. I'm not gonna lose in DFS with the Packers as well. But I get it.
I like Lazard more than you do. He's played 5 weeks. He has double-digit PPR in all those weeks. He just scored or had 100 yards in all 5 of his games. So I do. I like it a little more than you do. I think that give me 8 targets with A-Rod. I'm kind of going there. There's nothing else in that offense I'm doing, but I do like Lazard a little more than you do. I think that at 6,000. I mean, Brandon Ayuk it's always hard to time, but he's just insanely talented. He's so good. I mean, he saw the 2 touchdowns last week. 8 for 83 and 11 targets. If they get in a game where they have to throw, Ayuk just becomes a big weapon really fast, and it's a great matchup. Kansas City pass D has been bad. We mentioned that. We talked about Garoppolo. If I were going to stack Garoppolo, I'd do it with Ayuk this week. I know you mentioned Kittle. I think that works too. I think I saved the money on Ayuk over Debo, though.
Yeah, I like that too. Wow, there's actually so many good options in this range.
Yeah. We talked about Lockett, but let's get cheap now too. We talked about plenty of guys in the mid-range, expensive guys. Go like under 5,000. Usually I go 4,500, but there's a couple of guys right above that I want to talk about. So under 5,000, who do you find yourself liking this week to like take some shots to save some money on?
Yeah, we mentioned Alec Pierce a little. Yeah. I think he'd be okay.
I'm slowly selling you on the Matt Ryan offense, aren't I?
Oh, I don't know about that, but
I'm not. I hope I'm not because I haven't sold myself yet.
Yeah. You mentioned Mac Hollins. I mean, Mac Hollins would look really good with Renfrow out, but yeah. I think he'd be dependent on Renfrow being out.
For sure.
Another one that I think is a little bit interesting is Wan'Dale Robinson, 4,500. He caught 3 of 4 targets last week. I think he only played something like 25% of the snaps, or like 20 snaps.
He played 15 snaps.
15 snaps. Yeah, okay, 15 snaps. So people are going to see that and not going to want to roster him, and I get it. But Tony and Galladay are going to be out yet again. And, I mean, this is one of their promising rookies. You got to figure he plays a lot more, so I don't mind that. And I mentioned at the very start I'd be fine going with Nico Collins if I was going to have some Vegas stacks.
Pretty good. I had 4 names bolded down here. You named 3 of them. So that's pretty good. It means we're on the same page. I would like to be on the same page as you. You're the smart one here. So I like that. Pierce and Hollins, I think, work really well. I like Wan'Dale too. Like he looked when he played, like they seemed like they were setting up plays for him, I guess. When he only played 15 snaps, we got 4 targets. It's a really good target share per snap. The snap share has to go up, right? Like he's 4,500 against Jacksonville, a game where they conceivably could be trailing. I know that the Giants and they're whatever they are 5-1 somehow, but still underdogs in this game. I think they finally have to unleash him a little bit though. I think it's a spot where they're going to have to play him. The only other one I'll mention down here, and it's kind of a scary one, but kind of in that same vein with Amari Cooper and all the targets and them trailing. Donovan Peoples-Jones has 50-plus yards last 2 weeks, 21 targets last 2 weeks. It's hard to get anyone down here that's that active. He's 4,100. I'm pretty sure that he's thrown up zeros for me every time I played him the last 3 years. Whenever I'm like, oh, look at DPJ getting some action, catching a deep ball. Every time he blows up on me. But 4,100 I think is playable this week in a game script that should really lead themselves towards passing the ball out. I wouldn't play him and Amari, but a lineup where I don't play Amari and I want to get cheap somewhere. I think DPJ is my favorite, like down here punt play at 4,100 with the acknowledgement that it is not gone well in the past.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too. That's a really good call, actually. Not going to be owned at all. Big play upside, cheap. Yeah, those are the type of guys I can get on board with.
And 7 targets a game last 3 weeks. Great game script. I think that it lines up well on paper for DPJ to at least pay off that 4,100, maybe with a little bit of upside too. I feel like as we've talked about stacks, we've kind of hit most of the tight ends this week, but do you find yourself being able to play one of the expensive ones? We've got Kelsey at 8,000. He was 8 for 108 last week. Mark Andrews he's been a monster. He was 7 for 106 and a touchdown, 11 targets last week. He's 7,400. I usually don't find myself getting up here, and I don't know if that's a bad strategy call on my part because every time you look up, you're like, oh, Andrews and Kelsey on winning teams. Do you find yourself being able to play them this week with the way that salaries are kind of laid out?
Scott, I usually don't find myself getting up here either. I probably won't get to Kelsey, but if I play Lamar Jackson, I absolutely will play him with Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
And I probably will actually have some Jackson or Raven stacks, at least in my smaller entry stuff. So yeah, I'll play Mark Andrews. As far as these other guys, yeah, it's hard not to like the cheap guys that we mentioned, but I'll try to, a couple other guys in the cheap range. Bob Tonyan on the Packers. He had 12 targets.
I thought we weren't talking about the Packers offense anymore.
Oh no, I know. I had to. 10 catches though, and like a pretty good matchup. Look, all the points you made about like Lazard and the Packers, like I'm just scarred by these Packers, but you can still play some of them. Absolutely. This is a good matchup, and they still have Aaron Rodgers, so I'd be fine with Tonyan.
Does he go by Bob, or are you just being funny calling him that?
No. They call him Bob. Rodgers calls him really? Bob all the time. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. That makes me like him a little more. That makes me like him a little more this week.
It's a good nickname. And then, I'll mention again with the Chargers situation, if those guys are out, it would make Gerald Everett look pretty good. He had 5 catches on 7 targets last week. And, if you're playing Herbert, you probably want some Everett, assuming Allen's not in there.
Yeah, that's funny. I had Everett bolded too. Just like I'm going to play some Justin Herbert stacks as I usually do, but I like him especially this week against the I almost said Mariners, the Seahawks. So I do like that. I think it's a week where if I'm not finding the money to Andrews and Kelsey, I think I'm going pretty far down. I think I'm going like 4,000 cheaper. Like Hawkinson works. If we talked about Amon-Ra coming back, if you want to play Dallas, but like Hawkinson's had one amazing game and 11 for 88 the rest of the week. So like it's been 4 weeks of doing nothing and 1 week of being huge. Kyle Pitts is 4,300. Godspeed if you want to play him. I think I'm finally off him. He's 13 for 169 on the season. Like it's just he scored last week. Of course, he scored against the Niners. I just rolled my eyes.
Oh, and I think I'm going to do it to myself again. I might do it to myself again. Yeah. I might. I don't know.
It's if you're going to go run back with the Cincy, I mean they're going to have to throw. I get it. I don't know. I think I'm a little scarred. As you feel about the Packers offense, I feel about Kyle Pitts these days. But
I see another guy in here you might like. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it. Name him.
Especially, you talked about Prescott and the Cowboys a little. This might be the chance for Dalton Schultz down at 3,600.
Is he upright? Is he playing? Are we good there?
He's been practicing fully. And he looks pretty good in the projections at 3,600. And we saw a bunch of times last year, Dak likes to target him. He had some 2 touchdown games. He had a lot of games with 8-9 targets. So yeah, I wouldn't mind if you're on the Cowboys passing game, you should consider Schultz. He's cheap enough.
So you mentioned him and Dak. Do you know what his line was in week 1 when Dak played the whole game?
No, what was it?
7 for 62 on 9 targets.
Perfect.
Like that's a really good call by you. I'm gonna have to read up. I know he has the PCL injury that he missed 2 games and they played 10 snaps. Another. I'm gonna have to read up a little bit. But you mentioned he practiced fully. I really like that play under 4,000. I think that could be the way to go. As long as I'm gonna need to read up. I want to see what they say about maybe if he's gonna play full snaps because I obviously don't want to play him. He's gonna play 12 snaps, but. Man, your call with him and Dak together is obviously his price is way down playing with Rush and then going through the injury. That's a really good call for a guy that has more upside than we see in that price range.
Yeah, for 3,600, I think I almost just talked myself into some Dallas stacks. I mean,
I hope you did because you certainly talked me into it. So we're good.
I did. I mean, Dak, CD, and Schultz. I mean, that's really good for the money. I think.
I was playing Dak CD for sure. I'm definitely playing Dak CD Schultz now.
Love it.
I like it. We know we're coming back with the Sun God, so I got half my lineup set. I'm pretty much done. Sunday's just freed up a lot. The other guy in here, we mentioned him earlier, but I wanted to mention again, 2,500. Greg Dulcich scored in his first game. I think if you're going to punt, I think it's the way to go. Kate Otten at 2,700 works also if Brait is out. But I just like Dulcich. I mean, I don't like tying myself to Russell Wilson right now, but 2,500. He ran a route on 81% of the dropbacks, so he was like the guy. They put Albert O. He was inactive last week. Noah Fant is kind of a guy running around out there a little bit, but I think Dulcich will be popular. I think that 2,500. I mean, he won't be that popular as a tight end, but I think in terms of the punt plays, he'll be the most popular. But man, I love your call of going up to Schultz. I think I'm going to try and do that because I think that Dulcich and Otten will suck a lot of the popularity away from anybody that's cheap down there.
They definitely will. Yeah. So fingers crossed about Schultz. Also, if Darren Waller's out. Foster Moreau's going to get some ownership too, so that'll make the guys even less popular above.
Dulcich or Schultz for me. I think it's the way I'm going. Maybe Everett in some Charger stacks. Before we jump out of here, defense. I think defense finally got hard last week for the first time. We talked about like the weeks 2 before were like Dallas, and Dallas was so cheap. Last week was a little tough. I had the Ravens, did not go great. What are you doing in defense week? It seemed like the top ones, you had Dallas against Detroit at 4,000, Tampa Bay against Carolina with like no skill players at 3,900. Apologies to DJ Moore, but like no skill players at 3,900. Those seem to work on paper, but I think it's a week where we're going to save a little bit of money. How are you saving some money at the defense spot this week?
Yeah, it seems tougher to save money this week.
There's no obvious I just play this. Everybody's going to have it. It's easy, and then we had a couple of those weeks.
If salaries weren't a thing, Tampa Bay looks great against Carolina, like you mentioned. But yeah, we're going to have to pay down at least for cash games, and I'll try to in tournaments as well. But for cash games, I think people are going to look at the Jets against the Broncos, basically just because it's a good matchup, and the Jets have actually been okay, and Broncos games have just been great to target all the defenses in. So I can understand the Jets. Other than that, this is a tough range. I don't know. You give me something.
Well, you took mine, so the give me something's going to be. I agree with you on the Jets. Multiple sacks the last 4 weeks. They had 4, 2, 3, and 2. They've forced 5, 7, 8 turnovers the last 3 weeks. They had that 5 turnover game against Pittsburgh. Russ is a mess right now. I mean, I just don't know. You could see it breaking out at some point, but I'm going to like playing him until he does something. So they're 2,600. I think that works. I think the one that works that's in between here a little bit is Green Bay, 3,400 facing Taylor Heineke in Washington. So I think that works well. Carson Wentz is out. I do like that 3,400. And then Tennessee against Matt Ryan. I know we talked about Matt Ryan, how I'm trying to talk you into playing all the Matt Ryan, but obviously we joke. I hope nobody takes that seriously. 3,000 I think works. I think Ryan has shown that he can get sacked. He can fumble when he gets sacked, loose with the ball a little bit. So their offense has been rolling a little bit better. I still think they're one that you can make some mistakes on. So give me Tennessee at 3,000 and the Jets at 2,600. Probably the two places I'm going to go if I go cheap. But it's not an easy week on defense. So I'm going to go those two with the thought that I sprinkle in some Green Bay at 3,400.
Yeah. Again, I'm with you. The Packers were the other one I was going to mention in that top range. There's just really nothing else below. So this is defense, and you can kind of play anyone. We've seen these big underdog defenses still have big weeks, even when you don't think so. So, all the defenses down here are on the road except the cheapest one, which is the Panthers. Cheapest defense on the slate. I know they're playing against Tom Brady, but he throws picks. He takes sacks still. So, you take a chance on any of these for tournaments.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go, if I had to, I'd probably go Falcons above them just because they're really cheap at 200. And, maybe we talked about having the lowest pass rush, but at least they're facing a bad offensive line in Cincinnati. So maybe they get something there. But I think I'd probably find my way up to the Jets or Titans. But yeah, you're right. It's defense. Everybody can play. And it's hard to get to Panthers, but 2,200 saves you a lot of money elsewhere.
Yeah, Scott, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just remember which week was that? The Bengals were the chalkiest defense.
I do remember.
They ended up scoring 3 points, 2 points. Yeah, well, there was some in the big high stakes tournaments. It happened in 2 of the tournaments where whoever was in second place, I forget what the exact numbers were. They were down 10 points or something, and both lineups only had a defense left, and it was clearly that everyone just had the Bengals, and the smart people pivoted off the Bengals onto, I forget which defense it was, some huge underdog that was just a terrible play, and they ended up scoring 20 points, and it wins you all the money. So, defense is so random in NFL. Don't worry too much about it. I don't know. Just a little aside.
Can I find a way where I can play, have an Andy Dalton play again on Sunday, and I guess him?
Right.
The back-to-back pick sixes last night were insane.
Man.
They were up in the game. Then he throws a pick in the end zone, so they should have been up 2 touchdowns. And then they're tied, and he throws 2 picks. All of a sudden, it should have been up 10. And they're down 14. It was a wild swing.
It was wild. Yep. Yeah, and it resulted in yet another solo win in the showdown.
Oh, was it really?
Kings.
Did someone captain Arizona D?
You know, what they did was, no, they captained Dalton, but played them with Hopkins, Eno, Arizona D. Like, yeah, it was, a weird lineup like that.
Right.
And it resulted in another solo win. People are winning $500K, $1 million. It's happening every week in these showdowns.
It's wild because you look at those, you're like, it's only 6 guys. You just assume that all the possible lineups are going to be matched, and you look.
The games
up
have
and
been so crazy.
Yeah, it's just you. I mean, you wouldn't expect Dalton and the Arizona D to both be really good, and it's worked out. But that's those showdown slates are wild. Like somebody could be winning $1 million, and like one guy has a 7-yard catch, and all of a sudden it shifts. Like it's crazy. Seriously. How every little yard matters in those things.
Yeah, it happened. It actually happened on a kneel down a couple weeks ago. The quarterback lost. Yeah, the quarterback lost 2 yards, and that changed everything. That's the craziest stuff,
I still remember the Super Bowl where Kansas City beat Tampa. No, Kansas City beat the Niners, and that Mahomes had the 3 kneel downs that were he went like 8 yards back on him too. It was like minus 18 yards or something. Like he went under his rushing prop, and it was disgusting. But like
crazy,
you see that stuff. It's pretty wild. So. Well, Ryan, it was good to chat with you as always. Anybody else you want to talk about? Anything else on your mind before we jump out of here for week 7 of the NFL season?
Oh yeah, no, Scott, it was good. I don't think so. I think we hit on just about everything.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you jumping on as always. Always fun to chat with you. I want to thank No House Advantage for their sponsorship of the podcast. We greatly appreciate that. If you want to follow Ryan on Twitter, he is at Ryan Belongia, BELONGIA. I'm at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad is JENSTAD. We'll obviously be talking a lot of football there. So if you have any questions or as injuries come up or things shift, definitely ask us questions. I'd be happy to answer. Other than that, hope everybody has a really good week 7. Ryan and I will be back at you for week 8 next Friday morning. Hope everybody has a good one. Good luck in all your contests this weekend.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.